U.S. history and an Indian tribe's quest for justice collided in a makeshift courtroom at the University of New Mexico last week. An overflow audience of tribal and religious leaders, Native American rights activists, and the Valles Caldera officials there watched as lawyers presented their arguments to a panel of the 10th U.S. Court of Appeals. Now, Jemez Pueblo seeks the return of the land we know as the Valles Caldera. The Pueblo calls it the Jemez Holy Land, the tribe's, quote, spiritual mother, and they do claim Aboriginal title. We'll get into that. The Justice Department says the tribe's Aboriginal title was extinguished in 1860. And in 2012, a federal court denied the Pueblo's claims, ruling that the suit was barred because the United States had not waived its sovereign immunity. Joining us to discuss this case, this is so complicated, I love this one. Other topics of the week is the co-publisher of DukeCityFix.com, attorney and line regular Sophie Martin. Special thanks to line regular former state legislator and champion of conservative causes Daniel Foley for coming in on short notice. Thank you, Dan. You know him as the host of New Mexico People, Places, and Ideas on KUNM Radio. That would be Stephen Spitz. He's right there. And she's the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Civic Policy. We welcome back Stephanie Maez. Sophie, the notion that the United States has paid in full for apparent injustices heaped on Native Americans is, I think, for many of us, a dubious claim, at the least. But the tribe's appeal is an interesting one, isn't it? This whole idea of sovereignty and the idea of an Aboriginal claim. Let's start on that first. What does that exactly mean, an Aboriginal claim?
So essentially, without having been in on the early conversations about how to structure this claim, essentially, it seems to me what they're saying is that there's current law, there's past law, and then there's law before that. And actually, the U.S. legal system is built largely on law that we brought over from Britain. And so, sort of transplanted into the U.S. It's an interesting claim. It's one that I feel we're seeing come up more and more right now. And as these cases pass through, I think one of the questions that we need to ask is a judicial system that's really steeped in that British and American tradition, legal tradition, how are they going to react to these different types of claims?
Right.
We certainly see in other areas of Indian law a real appreciation for the importance of sovereignty of the Indian nation.
That's right.
Because they are themselves a sovereign nation within the United States. And that creates interesting tensions between our courts and their courts.
A lot of layers here.
Yeah.
And Stephen Spitz, good to see you back here for a holiday week.
Thank you, Gene.
The idea that there's evidence that ancestral folks were in fact on this land. And is that not a claim? Not asking you to adjudicate it here at our table, but you know what I mean. There were certain angles that are respected, and there's certain ones that aren't. And it's always a difficulty when folks say, we've been here.
From what I understand, I mean, the Jemez people, there were about 60 pueblos that surrounded the Valles Caldera.
Right.
They settled this land beginning in around 1300. They continued to use and occupy it, which is an English law term, continuously. And continuously, even after the Bacas, the Bacas had a land grant. So the Bacas got the land pursuant to after the Mexican War, the grant was recognized by the United States government.
And at a time that sovereignty,
Right.
the sovereignty of Indian nations was not really on the
Right,
radar.
but they
That's an important
continued to use the land and occupy the land. So their contention is, we never gave up our rights. We continue to have our rights. But the problem is there's a 1946 statute that said if you want to make this suit, you gotta, I can't believe this is the third show in a row where sovereign immunity comes up. Very boring.
Very interesting, isn't it?
But you've got to bring your suit within 5 years. They didn't do that. So they also faced that hurdle. But their point is they would like to be able to use and occupy their ceremonial land, the lands they've historically occupied. And the problem is that the trust that runs the Valles Caldera isn't letting them on. It isn't letting anyone on because they're out of money.
That's right.
That's essentially the problem.
That's a very good point right there.
That's what I find most concerning is this accessibility.
That's
piece.
right.
You know, I feel like the Jemez people have every right. They have an ancestral and a spiritual tie to this land. So, right now with the lawsuit, be it as it may, if the land is actually designated as a national park and maintained through the federal government, it's one question. Regardless of the outcome, I think that the Jemez people have every right to be able to access those ceremonial sites and you know, and really be a part of that.
Well, if the national park status does in fact fully come into play, doesn't the tribe still lose? It's still not theirs, for gosh sake. It's ostensibly everyone's, but not really.
Well, I think there could ultimately be a compromise. I think that, you know, they'll get the areas that they need to do what they do. They'll be closed off.
Right.
I don't think there'll be people being able to go there. I think they'll get to do what they need. I think at some point this will prevail. I think, you know, what's interesting is just sitting here at the table, and I'm no legal scholar. You hear them talk about the Aboriginal rights. It's interesting to see, does that bring this into a more global conversation about World Court, about bringing in folks like the United Nations and saying, hey, our Aboriginal rights are being harmed. Do other countries then step up and say, let's either fund this, let's fight this, let's help this? That really takes it out of just, you know, because to me it seems like you'd be saying, like we talked about earlier, you know, we have an Aboriginal right. We have to go to the people that took it from us and ask them to give it back to us.
It reminds me a little bit, actually, as you say that, of the huge shift that's happened really just even in the past 100 years, where we see, you know, pieces taken from Egypt, right, and brought to England and put in museums that are being repatriated, that are being sent back. This better understanding that you don't just kind of dig something up and take it away. Now this is a piece of land. It's a different situation, but in some ways, I think that spirit of the right thing to do is to return things to the people that they came from. That could apply to land too. And maybe should.
And I think there's a real opportunity for a happy compromise. The Valles Calderos can't operate. They don't have the money to operate. You've got a native entity that actually can generate some revenue. You know, maybe this becomes something that, you know, they get back the lands that they need to do what they need, and they help fund this so the rest of us can see what was changed, what was taken. Because, you know, one of the things I found in my time in the legislature, when you speak to a large majority of the Native American leaders, they want us to embrace their history. They want us to know about the things that happened. They want us to learn from that. And I think that I think you'd find the folks at the Jemez Pueblo, you know, Roger Madalena is one of the greatest legislators that I saw, a great man. He was the governor. I mean, my son's been up there running around in those places up there. I think that at the end of the day, I think they would love for the American students and American young people to learn about their culture, learn what they're doing, still have the ability to do the private stuff that they do. I think this could be a happy meeting between the two.
But interesting, Stephen, to your point earlier, you didn't say this, but nothing seems to be working. We don't have access now in any appreciable way. Depending on which way it falls, we still may not have access, and it's a pristine area.
That's got to be President Obama's fault. You know. Everything else is Susana Martinez's fault.
We've got these trusts set up to ostensibly do a lot of the things that Dan's talking about, but nothing seems to be working.
Well,
you see what I mean? It's just,
I think you're absolutely right, and that's because the Valles Calderos Trust doesn't have the money, and I think the Indians, the Pueblo people, can't negotiate with them because they don't even know that trust is supposed to be self-sufficient by 2015.
That's right.
So they're not going to be. So there's no reason to negotiate with them. You don't know if the Forest Service is going to get control. You don't know if the Park Service is going to get control. So the problem with the compromise is you don't know who to compromise with. And I think in terms of the Park Service, that's what our federal legislators have been pushing for. But that takes money. My view is there's probably going to be less money sloshing around in the federal system now the Republicans are controlling Congress. So I'm not optimistic about that.
Interesting. Finish for us, if you
Yeah, so yes, and I think we do know what we do know. We don't know all of those things that you just listed, but what we do know is that something is going to change. It has to, because its current status is not sustainable. And so I agree with my fellow panelist, Dan Foley, on this, there has to be a compromise. We have to figure out how we get a win-win out of this. And I think there's a real opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see what the 10th Circuit says.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. Up next, a conversation with MMA fighter Holly Holm.